I am choosing the wedding planner and the groom as my anchor scenario, and here is your continuous 1,129-word first-person romance story. The first time I realized I was in trouble was when I caught myself watching him from across the empty ballroom. Not as a wedding planner, not as a professional, but as a woman whose heartbeat felt suddenly dangerous. He stood there with his jacket off, his sleeves rolled up, reviewing the seating chart I had carefully arranged for his fiancée. Every time his eyes flicked up to meet mine, the rest of the room seemed to fade, and my fingers tingled with a heat that felt entirely wrong. And yet I could not look away. My life until then had been a tidy script. I was 38, comfortable in my career, proud of the events I had created for couples whose joy felt like bright pearls strung together over the years. Marriage was something I had tried once, quickly, in my late 20s, and abandoned when infidelity withered it from the inside out. I had learned to cherish my independence, my quiet home, my morning walks before sunrise along the waterfront with coffee steaming in my hand. I believed I understood where I belonged, at the side of love, but not inside it. Then Ethan arrived, a groom who was supposed to be someone else's forever. The day I met him, his fiancée had been late to the planning meeting, leaving us in the corner booth of a pastel-painted cafe. He told me about the vineyard proposal, how she cried when he knelt down. I smiled dutifully, mapping centerpieces in my mind, until the door opened and she breezed in, speaking over him, more focused on her phone than his story. Something shifted in me, and I did not want to name it. The turning point was quieter. A Tuesday, rain-washed streets. My clipboard tucked under one elbow as I arrived at the venue. He was there alone, leaning over the piano with a look that did not belong to a man about to marry. "She wants to postpone," he said, voice breaking slightly in the middle. I asked why, and he only shook his head. After that, I began seeing him more often, finalizing menus, replacing her in meetings she skipped. Loneliness slid between us like a familiar shadow. I had told myself heartbreak was something I had already survived, but watching him cradle his coffee and stare at nothing brought it back in flashes. The cold ring left behind in my dresser drawer, the hollow drumming of my steps in my old apartment after my ex walked out, the metallic tang of tears I bit back so hard they tasted of winter air. And yet here was Ethan, whose life looked shiny on paper but was quietly fraying. Spring came in a rush of lilacs and longer days, and with it the secrets. He confessed that they argued constantly, that she was considering moving abroad for a job offer. I should have offered only kind distance, but I found myself lingering over swatches with him, slowing my speech so the sound of my voice filled the space between us. My body betrayed me before my voice ever did, finding reasons to brush against his sleeve while examining floral arrangements, noticing the faint scent of cedar and clean cotton that clung to him. I wore a dress to one meeting I knew made my eyes brighter than usual, and when he glanced at me with something unspoken, my stomach turned over like a tide pulling away from shore. If this confession has you holding your breath and wondering how two people crossed such a line, hit like and share, because you will not believe what happened next. One evening, the venue lights dimmed early due to a power outage, leaving the lobby wrapped in soft, amber emergency glow. We sat on the edge of the stage, our knees just barely touching. The sound of distant rain, like a pattern our hearts were trying to match. He told me about losing his mother years ago, about how he had once thought love was simple, until he realized women needed more than promises. I told him quietly about my own loss, the betrayal that scraped me hollow, the months I spent convincing myself I did not need anyone. His hand brushed mine in the dimness, hesitated, then stayed there. We did not kiss. We did not need to. The air between us was heavy, and when the lights came back on, we stood too quickly, each hiding something in the sudden brightness. The postponement became official the following week. She left for Europe without attending the last meeting. He came instead, looking drawn but oddly calm, and halfway through discussing linen colors, he simply said, "I do not think I am going to reschedule." After the wedding that was not, I expected him to drift out of my life, but he called about the small things, recommendations for a baker, a suggestion for a music venue, excuses that felt paper-thin. We met once for coffee, then again for a walk along the pier. The wind was cold, and he offered me his scarf without hesitation, wrapping it around my neck while my pulse thrummed in my temple. He was younger than me by 7 years, and yet he listened with a depth men my own age often avoided. Our friendship, or whatever it was, became a warm ache I carried with me into summer. It was not about stolen glances anymore. It was about the odd way his voice softened when he said my name, the way I could forget every old wound when he laughed. I told myself age mattered, circumstances mattered, but I was wrong. What mattered was the way grief and hope had sat side by side between us, like old companions finally deciding to speak. The first time he touched my cheek in broad daylight, I was leaning against the railing outside a coffee shop. He brushed a strand of hair from my face as easily as if he had been doing it for years. I wanted to ask where we were going, what we thought this was, but instead, I said nothing. Sometimes naming a thing makes it disappear. When autumn rolled in with its copper sunsets, he told me he had no intention of dating anyone else for the time being. It was not a declaration. It was simply the truth, spoken like a stone dropped into still water. I nodded, pretending my heart was not already answering for me. We continued in our slow, careful orbit. No vows, no promises. No need to force the shape of us before it became clear on its own. Looking back now, I understand what that choice meant. We had each been standing at the edge of something, marriage for him, solitude for me, and we had chosen to step sideways instead, toward one another. Forbidden? Perhaps. Unexpected? Entirely. And somehow easy, easier than it should have been. The danger was in how natural it felt, how little effort it took to fall into him, without ever once needing to say, "I am falling." The wedding we never planned became the beginning of something else, something tender, cautious, and full of slow-burning light. He brought me small gifts, a book he loved, a bottle of wine from the vineyard where he had once proposed to her. I gave him nothing but my time, my listening, and my laughter when we forgot there had ever been any rules keeping us apart. Years may still stretch ahead before we call it by any name that carries weight. For now, I am content with the moments, with the way love has found me again in the quiet spaces between work and memory. Ethan is not the man I thought I would end up with, but he is the man who reminds me that connections worth keeping are rarely convenient, and second chances do not announce themselves. They simply wait for you to notice them. If you crave more raw emotional confessions, please like, share, and subscribe. Your next chapter awaits.